Hello, Heartmind fans and friends. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Heartmind with Holli. I'm really excited you're here, and I want to talk to you about something really important. And I want to also open up for me to say it a little bit wrong and kind of open a conversation with some ease, which is not easy to do online, as we know. So, before we begin this episode, it's very fraught with the Epstein Files. I'm drawing parallels with childhood, particularly sexual trauma with the Epstein Files and these patterns of abuse, of grooming, and patterns in families to have generations go through this type of trauma. So it could be really overwhelming and it might be triggering, and it might not be for you. So I really want you to tune into your own system and ask. And then if you do feel yourself finding triggers and memories start coming, this is something that we work on in my program, is ground yourself and ask, do I need a boundary right now or not? And I know sometimes that floods in, but that's the work and the power of starting to be more conscious with your trauma. So that might be leaning back and feeling the back of the chair or car seat, wiggling your toes, grounding the soles of your feet. It could also mean lifting and pulsing the pelvic floor and asking yourself, do I want to process this right now? Is it the right time? Do I need to pause this and not listen any further? Please take care of yourself, as always. And I want to be honest. When I thought about doing this episode and the calling and the need for the episode for myself, I started to feel the heebie-jeebies, butterflies. Who am I to speak in this conversation? This really big global conversation about sexual trauma and how our government and the wealthy and people that have a lot of influence and decision making have this sex trafficking ring. Sorry, even saying it, right? It's just a lot. And my self-worth started to shrink as soon as I thought about talking about it online, as soon as I thought about bringing my face into a conversation. And it's because part of me that says I'm not expert enough, it's a little imposter, but also like, keep it cool. Like, you don't have anything new to contribute. All the dialogue to keep me from talking and having the conversation. I don't care how many people listen to this. The important thing is I'm in the conversation and I'm showing up for myself right now and for, in my opinion, many of us that have been sexually abused as children. So I had to find my center and my intention of why I'm speaking this to you, why I'm bringing it into the fold. So if you've ever felt kind of that flood of smallness coming in, why am I or who am I to? Don't, you know what I'm feeling. And testimony surrounding Epstein is not just a true crime dialogue, and we know this. Once we strip back all of the scandal, really what it's about is a playbook. It's revealing to us in our consciousness, our collective knowing, the tactics that power, when given to the hands of unintentioned and unaligned for the whole people, when these types of people have the power, it really mirrors the same abuse we see in children, whether that's physical abuse and neglect or sexual. And many of you have experienced it, and that's why it is so painful to hear about these trials, to hear about the truth of this. I'm not trying to sensationalize the case. It's about understanding, again, more and seeing the red flags, validating our experiences and my own experience, protecting people more, protecting our communities, because a lot of this is bringing to the light just maybe how vulnerable and ignorant and innocent some of us have been. I myself had a split of course this is happening. I understand, I get it. I've understood this underworld my whole life. And outrage, how could this happen on this scale? But really more and more I just settle, like, of course. The household is a microcosm of that macro. All right, let's dive into the content for today. 5 shocking ways, maybe for some of us, maybe not for others, but 5 ways that Epstein's Files mirrors childhood abuse patterns. Number 1, the way that he recruited people into his system, particularly the victims. So this is really insidious. This parallels how we start to see bloodlines being leveraged in abused family systems. It's designed to kind of blur the lines and create confusion, silence, deeper control, really subtle control. In an abusive home, this might look like an older sibling being forced to discipline the younger one, or being made responsible for keeping the family's secrets. They become an enforcer and a keeper of the story, even though they're children. And it becomes this toxic loyalty and a shared bond through the trauma that they don't want to lose. And it's the one thing, precious thing that they have. And if they lose that, then there's nothing, or it's the feeling like there's nothing. And so the Epstein File shows the pattern on a massive scale. We see clear evidence of victims, some as young as 14 years old, being coerced, paid to bring in other girls. And they're in the bloodline of Epstein. They're in the bloodline of our American government system. Not that it just was only America, but you know. We hold a lot of that responsibility. And then the victim is enrolled and becomes guilty. And this starts to tie them deeper in the secret, makes them responsible. I'll tell you what, that was one of the toughest things that I had to forgive myself for. And I was 8 years old when I came out and told the police what happened to me. But I couldn't change how people responded and held my perpetrator accountable. And so one of the things that was so burdening is the guilt of him still being out and still potentially harming other people, all the people he may have harmed while I was silent for those younger years. So really forgiving myself, but this is one of the ways that women and girls are psychologically abused into thinking that they are responsible and holding the guilt as well, and therefore the narrative. And that's harder to hold than really getting on board and recruiting and following the system that gives them some sort of warmth and love, even that's obviously abused, but it gives them something. And so that stream and line of thinking and line of being becomes easier than splitting, isolating, but then also being guilty, being part of it. Again, I take really big breaths sometimes. I invite you to do the same. Whew. One survivor in the Epstein Files, Courtney Wild, has spoken about that guilt as well and recruiting her friends. And this creates a pyramid of abuse where trauma, again, starts to cascade downward, weaponizing our empowerment. And then it's not giving us a way out to survive. It's devastating. It forces victims to participate in their own exploitation. It confirms this divide and conquer kind of strategy of war. It's happening here in this in this traffic, and then it happens in the household, and it's very calculated. To be honest, it's calculating in the system. I'm not sure. I mean, it probably depends on every case. I wonder how calculated it is by the perpetrator, or if it's a line of genetic, particularly with family, obviously, genetic way of knowing how to survive. My dear friend Karen Harris, who I've met in Humboldt County, for example, is working with perpetrators, predators, and trying to understand and bring them back into the fold of our society, trying to understand this, because they are human, they are part of the human race. So I wonder about how calculating it is. I think that it is in creating what they want, but I don't think that there's a grander idea of the pain and suffering that they're causing potentially. Okay? All right, again, take a deep breath. If you grew up feeling responsible for other people's behavior, which a lot of people that are watching this do, if you grew up feeling responsible for people's emotions, for their own safety, especially when you were a child, just notice, whoo, this is starting to stir that up in your somatic system. Whew. And I was a child trying to survive an adult system, and I needed to survive. Okay, that's number one. Number two, grooming through false promises and desensitizing. All right, so there's a grooming process, and it's, again, strategic. I think it is really strategic, and oftentimes, people that are targeted are vulnerable, but also oftentimes very intelligent, and they play on the child or the young woman's strengths. They have such power and wisdom and intellect that they're going to start to try to manipulate that. So it uses trust to break down a person's boundaries. It uses trust to start to break down someone's integrity. And it often looks like a mentorship or a kindness. An abuser will spot a vulnerability, loneliness, low self-esteem, and present themselves as a solution. In terms of a child, same thing. They see maybe a place where that child's not meeting a need, and they jump on that vulnerability and ability to maybe fulfill that need in an alternate way. Recruiters really high up, like Ghislaine Maxwell, didn't approach vulnerable girls with overt threats and overt violence. It happens through a sense of mentorship and a sense of saving someone. And they offered career opportunities, they offered luxury, they offered modeling what a rich life looked like, and gave possibilities of dreams to teenagers, and really vulnerable, oftentimes financially low income, vulnerable women. A lot of people know about Virginia Giuffre and the tragic story there, and I'm so glad that so many people are bringing her story into light. And she was a teenager working as a spa attendant at Mar-a-Lago, and she was targeted. And this was designed to look really harmless, and then the promise of a better life, of special attention, where really like classical tactics. And the unfortunate thing is, like, mentorship and lifting people up into their active, empowered selves, it's just this fine line. And then we start to lose the ability maybe to discern, is this person taking advantage of me, or is this person really supporting me in my growth? And that becomes something we have to attune to for our own selves. And unfortunately, if we are very vulnerable and we're still trying to find that tether point and that alignment point as children, then we have no base or foundation for discerning that, right? And we know that our minds don't develop until our mid-20s now. So she was a very young girl. And part of that grooming in the second part is also desensitizing. So really making that boundary crossing feel really normal, and showing you have to have a fairly big organization with that, or in the household, maybe it's intergenerational family, making it seem normal many siblings or cousins, making it seem normal. In the Epstein cases, this often began under the pretense of, again, spa-like treatments and massage. So it starts to boil the fog and slowly turn up the heat so the victims don't even realize yet that they're in danger until it's too late. Children in households, there's nowhere else to go, but oftentimes that's how these women feel. There's nowhere else to go. So there's the fog that they're born into, or that we're born into, really, and the heat that we're born into. My abuse happened way when my consciousness was just coming to the surface as a being, right? So again, I want to offer a pause of reflection on that shocking number 2 way, and then move after a big breath to number 3. The power imbalance of wealth and intimidation. So as children, we're seeking that wealth, and we're often can be intimidated by the physical larger forces. And then everything that we are receiving, all of our resources is coming from this family adult, right? But that started to happen through that fog with the Epstein girls as well, or Epstein victims. In a family setting, the abuser is using its authority to create an environment where, again, the victim feels powerless. Age, physical strength, financial dependency, and then just social status, how people look at the structure. And then they feel, they accept more readily threats, intimidation, and they're to believe through those that that's how all adults are, and that no one's going to believe them. And then Epstein scaled this dynamic to a really unimaginable level, using extreme wealth to create, again, that sense of physical strength, a sense of age strength, financial dependency, and then the status of the roles that these powerful men were playing, and the titles that they had. And the files and the testimonies reveal how he hired private investigators to stalk and harass families of the abused as well as the abused. And that's the thing with threats, is that oftentimes predators threaten other relationships. We've seen it in TV, and it happens, whether it's a sibling or a loved one. This happened with me. That was one of the things that kept me silent as well. It's a terrifying magnification, this Epstein thing. And threatening a child by saying, if you tell anyone, I'll hurt your mother. If you tell anyone, I'll hurt XYZ. It's the burden is unimaginable on your nervous system. To unravel that is really, really difficult. The blatant evasion of accountability for protecting this is because we don't want to look at our own accountability and consequences. We don't want to look at the consequences of sending so many of our leaders to jail. What would that mean about us? Well, it's already here. It's in our faces now. And it's horrifying. And it's a horrifying confirmation of how power can be abused in the ultimate extreme. If you've ever watched someone above the rules escape consequences, a parent, a teacher, a community leader, there's this thing that happens in your body. And justice is a very nebulous thing. But what we can say is the justice within ourselves. I know what happened. I know what is real. My perception matters, and it matters to me, my gut, my heart, my body. So I'm going to invite you to take another slow exhale with me and say that. I know. My perception matters. What I saw, what I heard, what I experienced matters. Step number 4, targeting vulnerable types. I kind of already talked about this, but spotting vulnerability and using it against people. And that's what makes coming back to vulnerability in healing groups and transformational groups like mine and others out there, what makes it so hard, because it was the very thing that was maybe used against you, the vulnerability. So they look for specific ways where the parent's not present, the parent is maybe distracted, or these kinds of support systems in the child is not there. With Epstein, this was obvious as well. We've kind of talked about it, but there's this perceived glamour of Epstein's world, and it was a mask for that ugly mechanism of exploitation. And for survivors who have been told that they were asking for it, this pattern reveals the truth. Their vulnerability was not a flaw, but a resource that was intentionally exploited. They were asking for it because they were vulnerable. And it kind of feeds into this mentality that we have of that you should be able to protect yourself at all times, at every age, at any point. It's just not possible. It's not true. And it doesn't mean, because you didn't, that anyone has the right to abuse you. If you ever praised or blamed or for yourself, or felt that from someone else for being naive, too trusting, too needy, notice. And notice if you say that to yourself, that this feeds into the dynamic of vulnerable is not okay. Vulnerable means that you're going to be abused. That's the mentality. That's the mentality of this consciousness to keep abuse going. Number 5, normalization of community grooming. This is the process of normalizing what is happening, and the abuser rarely operates in a total vacuum. No one's going to like what I'm about to say. I say it to a very few people, and I'm going to say it now. Back in 2016, I was much more a part of vocalizing how I felt about the presidential election in America, and more so just who I was for, but not why I was against. And I have a lot of progressive friends that were definitely for Hillary. I was not. And I understand why they were, and I respect their choices with that. But what I felt and saw, and the more that, whether it was foreign policy or whether it was domestic policy, what I did also know on a metaphysical level is we had 2 choices. We had a predator, Trump, who was known for doing exactly all the things that we're talking about, who's in the Epstein Files, was a part of this consciousness of abuse, and continues to be. That's going to be our leader. Okay, we're going to keep in that vein of secrecy, abuse, now going down to the authoritarianism. But the other option was also in the same stream of consciousness, and I know people are going to be upset about that, but of how to keep abuse silent. So you had a predator man and a woman that was keeping her husband from being prosecuted, from being accounted for his actions of abusing women as well. And that's the household I grew up in. You had the father, patriarch, who was the abuser, and you had the matriarch who was enabling the abuse, asking you to don't look over there, don't look at that, just ignore that. But I'll still do some good over here, nurture you this way, but don't look that way. And that's what it reminded me of. And it was just the macrocosm of what was happening in so many households. I know I'm not alone with that. I know it. So I want to give a little pause there. If you ever were told everyone loves them, you must exaggerate, you must be exaggerating, you must be thinking of it wrong, you saw it wrong, everyone really loves that person, whether it was the abuser or people that were helping the abuse happen in the community, that just wasn't right. That just doesn't sit right in me. So taking a breath for that. All right, I want to take a pause and bring this back to heart-mind language. The 5 parallels we've just talked about: victim-led recruitment, grooming, abuse of power, targeting vulnerability, and community involvement, culpability. And they show how this network of Epstein's worked. and how it became such an incomprehensible and yet comprehensible evil that we've been a part of and our culture's been a part of for a very long time. And it was scaled up, corporatized, and it's the same psychological abuse that is enabling it to happen on the macro scale is happening in our houses, in our homes. If you're noticing the resonance of your own story, your reactions are not random. Your coping is not proof that you're weak or broken. You are responding to the need and want for shifts. You're responding on what needs to change in that playbook. The work of reclaiming your heart mind is slowly detangling and finding support with your center in your body, repopulating and knowing and being able to discern for yourself the importance of your prana, your life force. The horror of the Epstein case is not just what happened, but how it happened and how it reflects what our world believes, what our people believes. And recognizing these patterns and seeing them isn't an only intellectual academic experience. It helps us to see through the facade and helps us to understand silence. It helps us understand and reshape what victimhood is. It reminds us that whether it happens in a mansion or in a suburban home or in a home that was very, very small in a community-like style living, wherever it was, whatever home it was, the abuse is the same. I hope this was helpful and validating. I'd love to hear from you. Share it with someone that might need to hear it. You can also subscribe and leave a review or a message if something landed. And most importantly, as you step away from this episode, be gentle. Try to replenish yourself. Try to remember to ground. There's a 7-step method to bringing your prana back that I'm going to be continuously sharing, this heart-mind embodiment method. And may your heart-mind be reclaimed. It's not broken. This is a process. I'm really honored to walk with you. Take care. Enjoy your prana. Subscribe now for a free yoga nidra for your heart to reclaim your mind.